The wind howled through the narrow streets of the mining colony, carrying with it the sting of ice and the smell of metal dust. The sky above was black, lit only by the pale glow of the moons. Most shops had already shut their doors, their owners rushing home to warm fires and locked windows. Ryland stood alone in his small food stall at the edge of the main street. His stall wasn't much, just a few metal counters, a rusted cooking unit, and a flickering sign that read Ryland's hot stew -5 credits. The evening had been quiet. Too quiet. Hardly anyone had money to spend anymore. He ladled the last of the thick stew into a container, ready to store it for tomorrow. His hands were numb from the cold, and his breath came out in white clouds. He was just about to pull down the shutter when he felt a presence. Someone was watching him. Slowly. He turned his head. At first he saw only shadows. Then, in the dim light from his sign, two small figures appeared. They were standing at the far end of the street, pressed against the wall of a closed shop. Both were covered in thin rags, their heads wrapped in torn scarves. Even from this distance, Ryland could see they were shivering. Their eyes. Those eyes were fixed on the pot of stew in front of him. He could tell instantly they weren't just hungry. They were starving. For a moment, Ryland considered ignoring them. It wasn't unusual to see beggars in this colony, and most of the time, if you helped one, 10 more would show up. He wasn't exactly rich himself. Every credit mattered, but something about the way they stood there, too scared to come closer, stopped him from turning away. He gestured for them to come over. They didn't move. Instead, they looked at each other nervously, whispering something. In a language he didn't understand, the wind blew harder. One of them, the smaller one, coughed a weak, painful sound. That decided it for him. "Come on," Ryland said softly. "You'll freeze out there." Still, they hesitated. So he stepped forward, holding the pot of stew in one hand and a couple of wooden bowls in the other. Placed the bowls on the counter, ladled the thick steaming stew into them, and set them out where the girls could see the rising steam. The smell reached them. That was all it took. They approached slowly, their steps small and cautious, like animals afraid of a trap. The taller one had strange markings on her cheeks, faded but still visible under the dirt. The smaller one's hands trembled as she clutched the rag that served as her shawl. When they reached the counter, Ryland slid the bowls toward them. "No payment," he said. "Eat." They didn't speak. They didn't even thank him. They just picked up the bowls and began eating fast, almost desperately. The stew dripped from their chins as they shoveled it into their mouths. Ryland pretended not to notice, simply refilled their bowls when they emptied them. As they ate, he finally got a better look at them. They were young, too young to be alone. The older one might have been 15, maybe 16. The younger one, 12 at most. And yet, they had the hardened eyes of people who had seen more cruelty than kindness. "Where are your parents?" Ryland asked gently. The older girl froze for a second, then looked down without answering. The younger one avoided his eyes. He didn't ask again. When they finally slowed down, Ryland poured them cups of warm water. They sipped it carefully, as though afraid it might be taken away at any moment. For a while, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the cooking unit and the distant howl of the wind outside. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they stood up. "Wait," Ryland said, reaching into a box under the counter. He pulled out 2 small cloth packets. "Bread and a handful of preserved fruit. Take this. You'll need it later." The older girl's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something. But instead, she just took the packet, bowed her head, and turned away. The smaller one glanced back at him only once. Her eyes, big and dark, seemed to hold 1,000 words she couldn't speak. Then they slipped into the shadows. Disappearing as quietly as they had arrived, Ryland stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty street. Then he closed the stall, locking it for the night. He thought he'd never see them again, but the galaxy has a strange way of keeping track of debts. And this small act of kindness, given without thought, was about to change his life forever. Asterisk. 10 years. That was how long it had been since that cold night. The mining colony had changed, but not for the better. The streets were even more broken, the buildings more rusted, and the air thicker with dust. New owners came and went, but nothing ever really improved. Ryland's food stall had grown older too, just like him. The sign flickered more often now, and the cooking unit made a strange rattle when it heated up. His back ached after long shifts, and the customers who still came in were fewer than ever. He didn't think much about the two girls anymore, not because he forgot them, but because life on the colony had a way of burying memories under survival. Every day was about making enough credits to eat, keeping the stall running, and staying out of trouble with the greedy tax officers who patrolled the streets. Still, sometimes on the quiet nights, their faces came back to him. The way the younger one had looked over her shoulder, the way the older one had bowed her head before leaving. He wondered where they were now, alive, dead, scattered across the stars. One thing he was sure of: they would never remember him, but the galaxy had its own plans. It started on a normal, dusty afternoon. Ryland was sweeping the front of his stall when the cum device on his counter lit up. This was strange. He hadn't received a message in weeks. Most of the time, the device was used only for suppliers or old friends in nearby sectors. The screen blinked with a single incoming text. No sender ID, no origin code, just 5 words. Prepare to receive visitors. Ryland frowned. He tapped the screen, trying to trace the signal. Nothing. It was as if the message had come from nowhere. He shrugged it off. It's probably spam or a mistake. But an hour later, the wind shifted. The air grew strangely still, and a faint low hum began to rise from somewhere high above the colony. People stopped what they were doing, looking up at the pale sky. The hum grew louder, deeper, so deep it seemed to shake the ground beneath their feet. Ryland stepped out from behind the counter, squinting toward the horizon. Then he saw it. At first it looked like a star moving across the sky, growing brighter. With each passing second, as it came closer, it wasn't a star, it was a ship. Not the kind of transport freighter the colony usually saw. Something else entirely. The ship's hull gleamed silver and gold, reflecting the sunlight like a floating jewel. Its shape was smooth, almost alive, with curves that caught the light in strange, beautiful ways. Engines roared softly, but with power that made the air vibrate in his chest. It was massive. Larger than anything that had ever landed here. The ship cast a shadow over half the colony as it descended, blocking out the sun. The crowd gathered quickly, whispering in awe and fear. Whose ship is that? Is it the Empire? No. I've never seen markings like that. The vessel lowered itself with slow, deliberate grace, landing right in front of Ryland's stall. Dust and loose stones swirled into the air as its landing struts touched the ground. The colony fell silent. Every eye turned to him, Ryland, the man who ran the little stew stall, because somehow this impossible ship landed at his door. The main ramp hissed open. A soft light spilled out from within, and the sound of footsteps echoed across the metal. 2 tall figures emerged, both dressed in flowing armor that gleamed like polished moonlight. Their helmets hid their faces, but their movements were slow, purposeful. They were walking straight toward Ryland. The ground still trembled beneath Ryland's feet as the great ship settled into silence. Its shadow stretched across the entire street, swallowing the old stalls and crooked buildings in darkness. The sun was gone, replaced by the silver glow of the ship's hull. People had stopped breathing. The air felt heavy, as though the very presence of this vessel pressed down on them. The ramp was fully lowered now, its polished surface shining like a mirror. 2 tall figures continued their approach, the hiss of their armored boots echoing unnaturally in the quiet. Ryland's hands tightened on the edge of his counter. Every step they took seemed to stretch the moment longer, as though time itself slowed to watch. The crowd whispered behind him. Why here? They're looking for someone. It's him. They're coming for him. The 2 armored figures stopped just a few feet from his stall. They stood tall and still, there, mirrored helmets hiding their faces. Their armor was unlike anything Ryland had ever seen, woven with strands of gold, marked with flowing symbols that seemed to shift under the light. A faint hum came from within their suits, as if some unseen power coursed through them. Then, in perfect unison, they lifted their hands and removed their helmets. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Beneath the armor were two alien women strikingly beautiful, with features both fierce and regal. Their hair shimmered with a metallic sheen like threads of silver, and their eyes glowed faintly with a color Rylan couldn't name. But Rylan wasn't looking at their beauty. He was staring at their eyes, because he had seen those eyes before. Pair, older now, but still sharp, had once looked at him with guarded suspicion over a steaming bowl of stew. The other pair, wide, round, and once filled with hunger, had belonged to a girl who coughed in the cold while clutching a ragged shawl. It hit him like a blow to the chest. The older woman stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his, and then she knelt. She knelt before him. The sound of her armor hitting the ground rang out like a bell. The younger one followed, bowing her head low. The crowd erupted in whispers. No one in this sector knelt to a human ever. Rylan, of the colony, the older one said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of command. We have searched for you across the stars. Her words froze him in place. You saved our lives, the younger one added softly, her voice trembling with something that might have been emotion we never forgot. The older sister's lips curved into the faintest smile. And now, we have come to repay the debt. Asterisk, the silence that followed their words was so complete. Rylan could hear his own heartbeat. He looked down at the two kneeling women, his mind struggling to connect the fragile, starving girls from a decade ago with the powerful, commanding figures before him now. Around them, the crowd held its breath. In this colony, humans were barely tolerated, sometimes mocked, sometimes ignored. But here, two alien warriors, radiant in royal armor, were bowing before a simple food seller. The older woman slowly rose to her feet, her movements measured and graceful. The gold markings on her armor caught the dim light, glowing faintly as if alive. I am Captain Serenia, she said, her voice deep and resonant. Commander of the Silver Dagger Fleet, protector of 12 worlds. She paused, letting the words sink in. And once, I was a nameless street rat who would have died in the cold if not for you. The younger woman stepped forward, removing the scarf-like crest from her neck. And I am Lyra, she said, her voice lighter, but carrying an unmistakable strength. First officer of the same fleet. I was just a child that night, but I remember the warmth of your stew. I remember your eyes, kind, when everyone else looked away. Rylan's throat tightened. He hadn't expected thanks. He hadn't even remembered that night clearly until now. To him it had been a small, forgettable act. To them, it had been the turning point of their lives. Lyra smiled faintly. We're nothing, Rylan. We had no name, no home. That night you gave us more than food. You gave us the belief that we were worth saving. Serenia stepped closer, her gaze steady. When we left that night, we swore we would find you again. We could not return until we were strong enough to honor the debt properly. She turned slightly, raising one hand toward the massive ship behind her. Now, the Silver Dagger Fleet is ours to command. Every soldier aboard obeys our word, and today, they obey yours. The crowd gasped. Rylan almost laughed at the absurdity. Him command soldiers, fly a war fleet. He was just a cook in a dying colony. But then, Serenia spoke again, her tone softer now. We have come to take you from this place. You do not belong in these streets any longer. You belong with us. Lyra's eyes shone with emotion. Let us take you home, Rylan. To the stars. Rylan didn't speak right away. The cold wind slid between them, carrying whispers from the crowd that had gathered, but he barely heard them. You want me to go with you? He finally asked, his voice low, almost disbelieving. Serenia gave a small nod. Not just to go with us, Rylan. To live with us. To stand beside us as someone we honor above all. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. We have ships, worlds, power, but all of it is meaningless if we can't repay the one who made our life possible. Rylan shook his head slowly. You're giving me too much credit. I didn't Save you. I just gave you dinner. Serenia's lips curved into a faint smile, not mockery, but understanding. You see it as nothing. We see it as everything. A starving soul needs more than food, Rylan. That night you gave us dignity. The younger sister's voice trembled with emotion. And when you've lived in the shadows, kindness is more precious than gold. She gestured toward the ramp. Come inside. See what we have built. It's not a gift, it's a bond. Still, Rylan hesitated. His hands tightened on the edge of the counter behind him. I'm no soldier. I'm no commander. I'm just me. Serenia's gaze sharpened. And yet, without training, without weapons, without even knowing our names, you were the one who stood between us and death. That makes you more than a soldier. Lyra smiled faintly. Besides, we didn't come here to offer you a rank. We came to offer you a life. She lowered her voice, just enough for him to hear. A life where you'll never have to count coins before you eat. A life where no one dares look down on you because you're human. A life where you are surrounded by people who would die before letting harm touch you. Rylan's gaze shifted past them, toward the ship. Its silver hull seemed alive in the fading light, pulsing with faint energy lines. He could almost feel the heat of its engines from here. And if I say no, he asked, his voice quiet. Lyra's smile faded. Then we will still protect you from a distance. Always. Serenia took a step closer, her voice dropping into something firm, but almost pleading. But Rylan, we have been searching for you for 10 years. Don't make us leave without you. The crowd was silent now, every ear straining to hear his answer. Rylan looked from one sister to the other, seeing not the powerful warriors they had become, but the shivering girls he had once fed on a freezing night. And deep inside, something told him this wasn't just an offer, it was a crossroads. Asterisk. The words hung in the air like a storm about to break. Rylan felt the weight of every eye in the colony on him. But his mind wasn't in the present anymore. It was drifting, pulled back to a night long ago. He remembered the wind cutting through his coat, the sound of weak coughing, and the way two pairs of desperate eyes had stared at his pot of stew. He had acted without thinking, without planning, certainly without imagining that it would echo 10 years into the future now. Those same eyes were here again, different, stronger, sharper, unshakable. Serenia seemed to sense his hesitation. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. In our world, Rylan, debts are written in blood. That night you paid into a debt we could never forget. We have built everything you see today because we swore we would return it. Her words were heavy, not like a threat, but like a vow. Lyra's tones softened. We have walked battlefields where the air burned. We've sailed through storms of fire and metal. Each time we thought, will we ever find him? She took a breath, her voice trembling slightly. And now that we have, please don't send us away. Rylan's hands tightened at his sides. Part of him wanted to go, wanted to step onto that shining ship and see the worlds they spoke of. But another part whispered that he didn't belong in their universe. He was a cook, a traitor, a man who had spent his life in one dusty corner of the galaxy. What if I fail you? He asked, barely above a whisper. Serenia's eyes locked on his. You cannot fail us, because you already gave us everything we needed before we were anything. Lyra leaned forward, her voice almost a plea. It's not about leading us into war or commanding our soldiers. It's about being with us. You gave us warmth when we had none. Now let us give you the galaxy. And the silence stretched again. The crowd waited, the ship loomed, and the cold air pressed in. Rylan exhaled slowly. He realized the truth. This wasn't about riches or power or even gratitude. This was about connection, a bond forged in hunger and kindness that had survived the merciless stretch of time, and that kind of bond was rarer than anything in the galaxy. The moment felt endless. The cold wind swept through the street, carrying the scent of metal and dust, but Rylan barely noticed it. His gaze shifted from the towering ship to the two women standing before him, their eyes filled with something. Rare dash hope. Finally, he spoke. All right, he said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder, "I'll come with you." The words seemed to ripple through the crowd, gasps, murmurs, disbelief. No one here had ever seen a human leave the colony. In glory, Serena's lips curved into a slow, satisfied smile. Lyra's eyes shimmered not with the hard glow of a soldier, but with the softness of a child who had found something she thought was gone forever. Without another word, the sisters stepped to either side of him, one hand each, resting lightly on his arm, not guiding him, but walking with him. The three of them ascended the ramp together. The hum of the ship's engines deepened, and a soft light bathed them from above. As they reached the top, Ryland turned for one last look at the colony, the crooked streets, the faded signs, the people who had never truly seen him. All of it seemed smaller now. Then the ramp began to rise, sealing away the cold world he had known for so long. Inside, the ship was breathtaking halls, lined with crystal, floors that reflected like water, and alien soldiers standing at attention as he passed. Every single one saluted him. Lyra's voice broke the silence. "From this day forward, Ryland, wherever we go, you go. Whatever we face together," Serena added, "and whoever dares harm you will answer to the Silver Dagger Fleet." The ship lifted from the ground, engines roaring with a power that made the colony tremble. Outside, the people watched in stunned silence as the vessel pierced the clouds, leaving nothing but a streak of gold and silver across the sky. By nightfall, whispers would spread across the stars. A human cook from a forgotten colony now walked among queens, and somewhere deep in the galaxy's memory, a single truth would take root sometimes. The smallest act of kindness can change the fate of worlds.